Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Tamara Podemski, an actor and writer you may know from Dance Me Outside, Ready or Not, and 4 Sheets to the Wind. She also wrote on the upcoming TV series Future History, which will be airing on APTN later this fall. And she stars opposite Emily Hampshire in Gail Harvey's new feature Never Saw It Coming, which opens in Toronto this Friday, August 17th, at the Cineplex Yonge and Dundas. Tamara picked The Band's Visit, Eran Kolirin's 2007 culture clash comedy about an Egyptian police band that ends up stuck overnight in the wrong Israeli town thanks to a simple misunderstanding. The Egyptians don't really understand the Israelis don't really understand the Egyptians, and nobody's English is that good, but they're good people, and everyone likes music, and eventually they meet in the middle. And that's how this movie became a modest art house hit, and 10 years later, a Tony-winning Broadway sensation. It's crazy, right? And if you've seen it, it kind of makes sense. This is someone else's movie.
I chose, because my father's probably going to be listening, I chose Bikur Hatizmoret, which is The Band's Visit. Mm-hmm. And I guess I thought long and hard about what film I wanted to talk about. And it wasn't necessarily that it was my favorite film, but it is a film that since I've seen it has stayed with me. And the clarity of recall to certain scenes, it's just like, it's been, 10 years
11
now?
11 since it's been 11? Yeah, 2007.
And I can access those memories and those feelings and the sensation and just the quietness and the meditation on this humanity and people coming together. It's like it's always just at my fingertips.
Oh,
and so
great.
That his vision was so clear, the storytelling was so clear, it always just comes back in the news, and then you see it. And so watching this last year's Tony Awards and watching them sweep 10 Tony Awards, I'm just reminded, it wasn't just that original moment that I had with the film. It actually resonates and has resonated for 10 years or 11 years. And so I thought, well, that's worthy to talk about.
Yeah, I'm always glad when people bring up something relatively recent because it does mean it's had that kind of impact. Mm-hmm. I always find myself struggling with, best of lists when I'm finishing something at the end of the decade. It's always the stuff that's further back that's lingered the longest. Yeah. That's easier to pick. But The Band's Visit was one of those movies that I saw it. It slipped past me at the festival. I didn't catch up to it until it opened theatrically. And I went in so cynically, just because the sell on it had been, it's this pure, lovely, guileless little film about communication and understanding. Mm-hmm. And when you hear that at a film festival, you're just instantly, it's like, oh, you want the People's Choice Award really badly.
Yeah.
And then I saw it, it's like, oh no, it is. It actually is this thing that everybody keeps saying a movie is, but it's always part of the marketing plan. Yeah. It is a genuine film. Yeah. Like it's the universality of it is one thing, but the genius of the presentation of having the band all wear those weird little Smurf uniforms that immediately set them apart. It's an Egyptian band on their way into Israel, forced to derail their tour briefly, and then meet people who view them with suspicion, because the color is so perfect though, the sort of faded blue, the robin's egg blue color, because they don't look like they could be an invading force.
No, and it's this gray, just sand, like just that desert. Yeah. In openness.
Bleached, blasted setting.
And and it always just they look so out of place. Mm-hmm. But it's I love these stories that it's a scenario that these people would not be in the same company. And so what you get with that is not crazy action. You just get really interesting conversations.
Yeah, it's a film about awkward communication.
And I find myself laughing. I laugh through it a lot, but I find myself laughing at the awkwardness as opposed to the jokes. of just people trying to make themselves feel comfortable, and there's nothing comfortable about it. I think the other reason I came to it, so I appreciate that, you know, you saw it with after all the hullabaloo, and that's never, I always, I hate coming to a film when I've heard anything about it.
Yeah, I try to be as cold as I possibly can, and this was just one of those things where it's like, oh, you missed the bands, isn't it? It was so
I know,
lovely.
and then I know. So I had the very unique experience of touring another film that I had done called Four Sheets to the Wind, and we, the director and I, Sterling, were in Munich at the time, and we had a little window to see one film. And we didn't have a choice. It was, this is, if you're going to see anything, and we really wanted to see something, so we went and we saw this film. Unfortunately, we didn't realize we're in Munich, and so a foreign film in Germany would not have any English subtitles. But we went. The film is 50% English, which is why it didn't get nominated for that Academy Award. But still, it is a foreign film, so it should have been. Should have made the entry.
We can talk about that too.
But yeah, what we couldn't believe after, and what was part of the mastery of the storytelling, was that we understood the 50% of what was being said, and yet we understood 100% of what was being felt and experienced. Yeah. And that was the thing that made me, both of us, walk away and like in awe of, how do you do that? Like, that's him, that's it's Eran, right? Eran Kolirin. Yeah. That's the director, but that's the performers. Yeah. I mean, the performances, like, to not understand half of what they were saying but get everything that they were doing.
Yeah. It's the aesthetics, right? It's making sure that everyone in the film is acting at that level. Yeah. A couple of reviews referenced silent movies, which I immediately discounted, and then thought, no, actually, you're right. It's part of the visual palette too. Yeah. It's the color the subtle color coding and not too subtle color coding, and the way that everyone is pitching a little higher because they know they're not being understood. So if you yourself don't understand them, you're going to be looking at the body cues and trying to figure out from facial expressions. Exactly. And it really works.
That makes sense. I probably could have watched the whole thing without sound. I understood what was happening.
I have seen a handful of movies that way at various film festivals by accidents at Cannes, things like that. My one trip to Cannes, there was a documentary about Lawrence of Arabia that was made by a French television channel and did not have subtitles for the French voiceover. Right. But all the archival material is in English. So, again, I managed. Yeah. And my French is kind of okay. So I got through it. But with the band's visit, I think it would actually be the experience that Roger Ebert described. He saw Nosferatu. Wait, no. I'm screwing this up. I'm actually remembering my own experience. Roger Ebert once said that Herzog's Nosferatu is a film that doesn't require dialogue because it's based on a silent, and there is constant conversation, but because it's a vampire movie, that no one is ever talking about anything other than death. Right. And imminent, the vampire is just sort of clocking time, marking time to make people feel comfortable before he can bite them, and it's all about this. And I thought he was exaggerating until I saw it for the first time in a theater that had been shipped a French subtitled German print. And so I had to fumble through between my base understanding of French, and this was maybe 20 years ago at the review, and they apologized they didn't know, and they apologized when they got there and said, it's in German, but it's also French subs instead of English subs. We got the print from Quebec, and nobody noticed. So we watched it, all of us, and most of us didn't speak French, and so there was this really uncomfortable feeling in the room for about 10 minutes until you kind of accept the rhythm of the film and understand that that Ebert was right. The dialogue doesn't matter. And in the band's visit, you're right. Even with the English stuff, none of it is really necessary because it's all about people moving physically closer together in tiny steps. Yeah, exactly. So the visuals tell the whole story. Yeah.
I mean, it almost makes you think that it's a great test to put any film through to watch it.
Can you?
Yes, in silent. But it was nice to be able to watch it again.
How did it play in Munich? I mean, what did the audience do?
I can't remember. We had to watch so intently to follow.
Course,
so
yeah.
That I wasn't. I have no memory of how the audience responded. But I do remember that it was it's a small film festival, and it's packed. I remember that feeling, that the interest of, these stories from all over the world, and it's a big city, Munich, but it's still a small, very intimate film festival. And so I just love, because it's such a story of the heart, and it's impossible to watch it without just feeling your heart open a little bit. And so I was just like, this, any place in the world where your heart is cracked open just a bit, and you know that you're sharing a space with 400 other people whose hearts are cracking open just a bit. I was happy about that.
That's lovely. And I can easily see, again, when they first announced that there was going to be a Broadway musical version of this film, I thought that was a step too far, but nope. It translates. It can easily translate. It's that amazing thing that happens when you find a story that, like, literally no one can object to anything that happens in it, and somehow it's not pablum.
Yeah.
That it's sly and romantic, and it's adult without being explicit about anything. It's just all very. It's just so smart. And
I still was surprised, though, because in the same way that. In the film world, it wasn't like it was critically acclaimed. It still is a foreign film.
Sure.
It still is, nothing crazy happens in it, and yet it was just so far reaching. And then I thought, wow, and competing in the Broadway world, they like their big show numbers, and you see what it was up against. But when it and the music is beautiful, and it also is about music, like, so that part fits in. But
it lends itself to the,
for 10 Tony Awards at a time when it's competing with, Harry Potter Part 1 and 2, and it just confirms the simple message of people coming together and connecting. Well, connecting as people in their loneliness.
Yeah.
And as they're lonely, but their loneliness is what almost makes them more inclined to want to connect.
Yeah.
Want to find that access point. And sometimes the more severe the loneliness, the more the deeper the desire to connect.
And you can connect over, what does the kid ask? Do you like Chet Baker?
Yeah.
That's his passport. That's his language. And it's such a lame thing to just say instead of to experience. But music is the universal language, and it says, we can all communicate. And it's like, yes, but we actually can. Yeah. There is something. I was in Germany 2 weeks ago for a wedding, in this tiny village outside of Cologne. It was my first time in Germany, and the wedding, the music was, it was a DJ, and he was kind of going through the basic hits, but it was an English family and a German family, and if you put on Wonderwall, it's become a football song, so all of the Manchester people just flood and sing along and dance, and all the Germans just immediately retreated and to the other side and just watched this insane thing that was happening. And then there was a polka, an actual unironic polka, and everybody sort of did a conga line to it and all the English people just were seated to one side, and the Germans did their polka. And as the Canadian, I was just sort of staring and thinking, I don't understand either side of this. Mm-hmm. And then what was the song? Yeah, there was a house music cover somehow of John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads.
Yeah.
By, I'm going to say, either a German or French artist. It was totally a European Take Me Home Country Roads kind of performance. Yeah. And it killed. Everybody got into it. Yeah. And there wasn't a single American in the room. Yeah. But that was, I just watched this happen, and it's all flooding back now very vividly, because that is essentially what happens over and over again between 2 or 3 individuals in the band's
Yeah.
visit. It's just, it's not, there's no house beat to it.
But it's not even the cross culture, because we would think that this is, and it doesn't like beat you over the head with this Arab and Israelis. Look at how well they get along.
Yeah,
and
again, that was what set me off at the first time.
Yeah.
It's like, really? Really? That's what this is about?
But the Chet Baker one wasn't about the cross cultural intersection. It was the older man and the younger man, both the Arabs. I think his name is Khalid.
Yes,
Khalid,
the band leader.
and that. When he finally gave him, yes, I know Chet Baker, yes, and I have every album. Not that I don't know if I'm giving anything away, but yeah, that is one of the most. It's and you just, because you're just waiting, like someone meet him there in his Chet Baker love, and when he gave him that, it's just it was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and it's unsaccharine. It doesn't feel, nothing in the movie feels the way I dreaded that it would.
Yeah.
Which, again, I've seen it twice now, and the first time through was a lot more tense of an experience, because I'm sure this has happened to you, this happens to everybody, I hope. The second experience of a film, once you know where it's going, some part of your brain can just relax and enjoy it, even if it's a thriller, even if it's an action movie, you know basically who lives, who dies, who wins, who loses. And the first time I sat through the band's visit was very tense, because it's like, oh, this isn't going to go, like, please don't screw this up.
Yeah.
Make it to the third act. I don't want this to crap itself. And it doesn't. And then you watch it again, I think it must have been a month or 2 later, and it's so pleasurable.
Yeah.
And then I start to knock myself for having my guard up the first time, and wondering why, I'm old enough now that I should be able to just trust the film, and it all becomes about me, berating myself for not liking a movie the first time. But then you try to explain it to someone, and you sound like you are a cult member. Like, it's so sweet, it's so nice, and it's exactly what people were saying to me, and I didn't believe them, so I understand what I must sound like.
Yeah.
But it is a movie that it trusts that you will understand how genuine it is, right? Like, that's the thing that makes it work. But you have to convince yourself that it's okay, that the film won't betray you.
Yeah.
And I think the way that it works, the way the script works as well as it does, is that the concept of the film, the conceit of the film, is so simple that everyone in it is an underdog. Mm-hmm. That there's no villain, not really. No. There's intolerance, which is almost immediately pushed aside, and it moves to suspicion, which is a better engine for comedy. If you're reenacting the Arab-Israeli conflict as a metaphor, you can't make a comedy. I mean, you can, but it's a really gruesome one. It always has to end very, very badly, and it's punching down instead of punching up. And what this movie does is it just sort of establishes the premise, gives us time to acclimate ourselves to it, and then just rolls along. Yeah.
But I do feel like he gave us a clue or a cue early on when they first arrive, and it's Dina's cafe, and she invites them in to eat, and they're sitting at the table, and one of the band members looks up, and he sees all the pictures on the wall, and there's army tanks, and it's like, some glorified shot of a war, and he hangs his hat on it, and it's just
that's true,
we're not going to talk about this,
and
not in a way, but it's like, that's not what this is about. We actually just gonna, that's a fact. We're not going to go into this, and I took that as a cue of, well, obviously just a personal character cue, but as also a cue to the viewer, that's not what this is about.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point too. And if that makes me think that the villain is history ultimately. I mean, like, that's it's more of an obstacle than a villain, but but it is one that is immediately neutered. It's neutered. Yeah. So, and again, like, if you sit people down from opposing cultures in an unofficial capacity, then generally they don't talk about history. They don't immediately. I mean, that's the lie of all of the other straight treatments of the story, is that they look at what a tragedy. They immediately revert to their old hatreds and their ingrained, and absolutely, bigotry is a thing, and it's real, especially in that part of the world. But more often than not, it's easier to hate someone who isn't sitting across a table from you, right? Like, you can hate in the abstract. And this film, he does it so gracefully. And part of the awkwardness can be read that way. Like, if you want to, you can see it that way. But I don't think I don't think the actors are playing that kind of resentment. There's a sheepishness. There's a sort of a general softening that happens, and it very quickly you can believe that it's just it really is simply a language barrier and not a historical hatred that's separating people.
The softening that you're talking about, I always use in acting world, or actually even just relationship world.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of it as, when you see somebody, when you feel seen by somebody, and he does these really beautiful pairings, these three pairings. So it's the two fathers, one who's trying to finish his concerto, and the other who's been on leave from work, and both kind of trapped.
Oh yeah, no. Everyone is literally trapped by the situation, but
these
far
two
more
fathers
so here,
have this way that they, literally he can't finish his concerto because he had, his wife had a baby, and then life got busy, and then this other one where you can see this terrible wife's birthday party that is crashed by the band, and the beautiful moment where, oh my gosh, it actually makes me cry, but when the I can't remember his name, but the Israeli father is sitting there staring at his daughter in the crib, and he's thinking about why the guy can't finish his concerto, and he goes, maybe it's not a big thing, maybe it just ends, and it's not a big explosion, it's just a room and a sleeping child and loneliness. Like, it's so sweet, and it's so true to their experience of where the hell did their life go when they became fathers, and the pressures of family, and where did their dreams go. And then the second pairing of Dina and Tofi in their loneliness and both knowing love, wanting love, and I love that nothing is romantic between them. That was my favorite thing, and that's, I think, also the first time I saw it. I think the part of me that you were speaking about, where you're like, on guard, please don't screw this up, up. All I was praying for was, please don't make them, like, because their journey wouldn't work. Their bond, their deep understanding of each other wouldn't work if it got romantic.
Yeah, no, it's a mutual respect, which is such a
and they
rare
see
place.
each other in their in their loneliness, and then the other great pair with Khaled and the virgin Israeli boy with the roller skating scene, where you have this like gigolo guy,
sort of taking him under his wing,
and telling him how to make a move on a girl. And so it's just, nothing was political. These are like the basic human communication 101.
Yeah. I mean, it really boils it down to the most simple concepts, and again, that's how it travels internationally. That's how people connect to it anywhere. I think everybody, I don't know the experience of being stranded in an Israeli border town, but I've certainly considered the direction of my life and whether or not it's gone where I wanted it to go. Mostly just resenting the fact that we don't have flying cars and all that stuff. Like, we were sold a bill of goods, but that's a story for another time. But the sense of, just the sense of yearning, and the sense of striving to be acknowledged and seen and recognized, and again, the smallness of it. It could be any border anywhere. It could be, I'm surprised there was no immediate attempt to remake it for like Texas and Mexico or something like that, where you could someone may yet still do it, because it seems like that's a story that never goes away. There's always going to be conflict between tribes of people, wherever the tribes may be, whatever the tribes may be. There could be Oh, you know what? Now that I think about it, there's probably an English comedy about soccer fans whose bus breaks down somewhere.
I mean, it's a great premise.
Yeah.
It's like your classic premise of, how do you get people who would never be in the same location? It's just, it makes for great comedy. It makes for great drama. It makes for great conflict tension.
Yeah, it's a premise as old as the hills.
But I guess I respected that he trusted us to interpret it by just feeling it and not pushing anything, stuffing anything down our throat. And I often, as a viewer, that's my biggest my biggest annoyance and real frustration is when you don't trust that we actually we have so many ways to interpret stories, on personal levels, on energetic levels, on just the psychological. Give us the metaphors. Give us all the other ways. Give us the symbolism. Give us the colors. Just don't spell it out for us. And I know there's some people who are like, don't like those films, and they leave saying like, "What was the point of that?" Or "I don't get it." But I appreciate the subtler ways to tell a story. And I also think that as an actor, I appreciate playing those so much more, because you have nothing else to go on but the truest expression of what that moment of interaction or sensation is.
Yeah.
And watching the film again, I was in awe of the performances, that there is not a false note there. And that's really hard to say about many films out there. And I do think it's more challenging. I always remember Emma Thompson in an interview. She said, the big scenes, those are easy to play. The crying, the yelling, when you're sitting across from your husband of 50 years, who you hate and cannot believe you have to share a bed with him again tonight, and you ask him to pass the salt, play that.
Yeah.
How do you play that? And that's where I love to kind of come to a character and their way in the world, from that place of, the big Oscar moments are those big, those big scenes. But I so much more appreciate, and I think people resonate with those so much more because they recognize, they know it. They don't need the grand gestures. It's the small stuff, and it really shows it says so much about the brilliant casting, because they all just they hit the notes right.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I always come back to in these conversations. This is a first feature. He got it. Like, he knew
and wrote it.
Yeah,
and directed it.
So many films from first-time directors are so insistent on their style or their impact, and they need to be noticed.
Yeah,
a filmmaker. It's like the first novel. You put everything into it. You're afraid this will be your only chance. Someone will take it away from you, and there's always this sense of, sometimes you get an incredibly assured debut, sometimes you get a movie that moves with confidence, but more often than not, it's a calling card for talent.
Yeah.
Look what else I can do.
Yeah.
This movie, it doesn't even come up to you and beg to be liked.
Yeah.
It's just there.
Yeah.
It's really, it is confident that way, but in an unshowy, sort of entirely relaxed approach that made me even happier for it succeeding, because it's just like watching someone walk up to a golf tee and hit a hole-in-one without even straining.
Yeah, it's not trying too hard.
Yeah, and no one else is either. He clearly can direct actors, and everybody responds to him, to the tone. They all find the right tension, and they just play it, and it's got music in it, and it's got all this other stuff. And
you can tell he trusted the actors. Like, obviously guided them well, but there's some powerful actors there, and you know just by their own bodies of work.
Well, we were going over, like, Renée Elkins had already directed a movie on her own.
But she is a powerhouse of a woman, and I will never cut a watermelon the same. After I saw her in that watermelon scene, and then I have seen glimpses of, or little excerpts from the Broadway musical, and of course they have that watermelon scene.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the, and especially for like an Israeli woman, like it's such a, like the ease, the skill, the power of it. She doesn't overpower him, and he just gives her this space to be so strong, so beautiful, and yet you're not wanting to be her.
No,
because it's sad.
Yeah, exactly. She knows.
Yeah.
She knows her own tragedy as well as her own strength.
Yeah.
And that's something, it makes her his equal.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
But it also lets us understand that it's not a role she necessarily wants.
Yeah.
And, that comes back to the idea of people whose lives get away from them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the larger sense, if you're looking for a metaphor, the Israeli-Arab conflict has stolen the destinies and the futures of tens of hundreds of thousands of people over decades, because nobody's life is going where they want it. Even the ones who are living happily are still in a compromised state, literally. But none of it comes out. Like, it's just there. It's all just there if you want to add it for that extra level of melancholy. But these people don't have the time to explain themselves or the interest in doing it.
And you don't feel bad for them. Yeah. Like, I thought that was really interesting too, that there isn't pity. He's not asking for that. You don't want to be any of them. So it's not he's not trying to endow them with any kind of fantasy or
there's no idealization, right? They're presented as they are.
Yes, which doesn't make you pity them nor want to be them, or envy them, and so, which I think is also a very clever thing. I don't know how you do that. It's certainly not in filmmaking 101. You want people to want to be your people that you're creating, or hate them. You want to stir up some really strong emotion towards them, and that's also not happening in it, which is crazy.
And that's what I meant about the first feature. But you care about them. Like, he just doesn't try to sell anything.
I know. So it ends up being a little bit of a. I mean, I'm early in my screenwriting career, but I as an actor, over 25 years, the scripts that I've read, the stories that I've played out, seeing what something looks like, and then how it goes to the screen, I feel like I have a really great training and understanding for how these stories work, and for where they fall, what their weaknesses are. But this one kind of is a mystery to me. I'm not quite, other than he just wrote from his heart.
Yeah.
Because really, how does something like that how does a story about those people become so successful when you're not pulling heartstrings, and when you're not over glorifying or over dramatizing something?
Yeah, I mean,
but that's why I think it's just pure.
Yeah,
it's just freaking pure.
It's almost like he found the algorithm, whatever it is.
Yeah.
For
of honesty,
empathy,
yes,
like encouraging people to lean into the story rather than be repulsed by the calculation. It doesn't feel calculated.
No.
Which, to bring it back to my initial misgivings, right? Like, it sounded like the most contrived thing.
Wow.
That's like, really, and they all learn to be better people. Really, that's what it is, isn't it? That's what happens. Music brings in. Jesus, yes. But I defy anybody to watch it and remain cynical. It is just It doesn't. First of all, it doesn't care if I'm cynical. It just tells its story.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, right? There's no sell. It's just a really good movie, and of the sort that people don't make anymore, because when they do.
Oh, well, how the heck do you sell that?
Yeah, and it's a hard sell. or you
and nothing really happens.
Yeah.
But it's like the opening line. Not a long time ago. One time, however they started,
Once
one day,
time, that kind
once
of
upon a
thing.
time, a band ended up here, and you probably didn't hear about it because it wasn't that important.
Yeah.
That's how they opened the film.
It's just a great way of underselling, right?
Yes.
Like, there's, the immediate impulse is, of course, you're like, well, if it's not that interesting, why am I watching this movie? But then you very quickly, no, you learn that there's a reason, like that's the whole, what do they say about stage plays? Always start where you would finish. Like, begin after the party, begin after the dinner, start with characters coming home.
Yeah.
Wherever
after the big action took place.
Yeah, wherever they're going to be,
Yeah.
that's the most dramatic thing, because it's all about fallout.
Yeah.
Or confrontation of someone arriving. And this movie just has, every scene is like that. Every scene is the beginning of another play. It's the beginning of another story for the characters that are in it. And it's just marvelous. It's just such an oh, God damn it, I'm talking in pull quotes. It's an unexpected delight. But it is! It's the film that, it's hard to resist.
It's funny because I asked my husband I was like, do you want, I'm going to watch it again. Do you want to join me? You've never seen it? And so he's watching, and in the first 10 minutes, he's like, this is your favorite film? And I said, no, it's not my favorite film. But this is a film that has been with me for a very long time, and I can't escape it. And I keep coming back to it. But by the end of it, he was like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? How do you make us care about these people?
Mm-hmm.
That nothing spectacular is happening. And at the end, it's not a happy ending. It's not a not happy ending.
Yeah.
But the weirdest thing is when they finally play at the end, I remember in the theater dancing, and I remember just that music is just amazing music. But when that beat kicks in and he starts with the drums, it's like I'm celebrating. I'm happy. I feel good right now.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't really know what I'm saying, but because you just everyone just keeps living, moving on, doing your thing.
Yeah.
And doing it the best way you can.
Yeah, it feels like an acknowledgement of everything that's happened.
Yeah.
That it is a climax, technically, but it isn't the end of anything. Yeah, it's just, they're all going to go their separate ways, and then we'll never be the same again. That's like that quiet understanding,
But something's changed.
Yeah. Just they're what's the line? Somebody used to say this, if you could end a film where everyone's worlds are larger.
Yeah.
If you can end a novel with a sense of a greater illumination of the world, then that's what you should aim for.
And they do that.
Yeah.
Well, he does that.
Yeah. It'll just, even if it's simply that they'll be humming that music for the rest of their lives in idle moments. You just have a sense of continuity, of there's something else is going to happen to them, and they'll be different in their responses because of what's happened here. Yeah. And
I just spoke to friends who came back from New York and saw it there, and they hadn't seen the film.
Oh yeah.
So for them, that's their only experience. Of the story, and they just said it was one of the most beautiful things.
Oh, nice.
So now I have to go to New York and see it, and just continue the next decade of how this story is going to feed me.
And I know, because this is fascinating to me as well, that Tony Shalhoub had to leave the show for a while, and so the actor from the film is now
the actor who played Tufik
is now playing the role, right? And I'm gonna look him. I'm just gonna blatantly look it up right now because I'll get the pronunciation wrong. Sasan Gabai.
Yeah.
Is playing the role on Broadway.
I know.
Which, again, for a working actor 10 years ago, I can't imagine he expected that was going to happen.
No, but it's gonna. And I'm actually quite excited by that, because that means if I book now,
you'll have a chance.
Yes.
Yeah. Although Tony Shalhoub, who's become this recurring character on the podcast, because just last week we did Big Night.
Oh wow!
Yeah, which is a wonderful film, and again, he's a Lebanese American actor playing an Italian caricature. Here, he would be playing someone far, far closer to his own heritage and experience, and I'd love to see that. I would, especially because I have seen him in the flesh, and his minimalism is amazing, and I'd love to see how that translates to stage work. Yeah. But I kind of want to see Gabai in the role, because why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
So, when you go? That's the most important question. When can you get there?
I don't know. It's now, this is my kick in the butt to make it happen. This is my reminder of, the film has had an impact on you. Not just give it its props.
Its due.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, to that end, then, that brings us to the final question of the podcast, which is, is there anything of the band's visit that you have borrowed or stolen or referenced or incorporated into your own creative DNA? I mean, as a writer or as a performer?
Yeah, I think the trusting that people will feel the things you want them to feel. Because we are all having a human experience here. And even if sometimes I might be, and often my work as an actor is culturally specific, and I
Sure.
do stories that are, very culturally specific. The question is always, how does that translate, or how do you make that more universal experience? And I've always believed, and I know that because I've seen how the work has gone beyond that boundary. If you keep it based in that human place of love, of wanting to connect, and not have the sometimes the mission or the mandate to spread the message, which this film could have very well done. Keep it about the people, keep it about the heart, and I think that is those are good words for an artist to live by.
My thanks to Tamara Podemski, who you can see alongside Emily Hampshire, Eric Roberts, and Katie Boland in Never Saw It Coming, which opens in Toronto at the Cineplex Yonge and Dundas this Friday, August 17th. It'll be playing elsewhere and available on demand later this year. You can follow Tamara on Twitter at Tamara Podemski, all one word, and though the DVD edition of The Band's Visit is out of print, you can snag a used copy pretty much anywhere, and it's available on iTunes and through Amazon Video in the US. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps. It truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.